Welcome to Fired Up Conservative Talk, where this conservative Latino brings you the truth, ugly or not. And we've got a doozy for you today. The Iran so-called peace deal that JD Vance and Trump are trying to sell as a win. There's a political phrase that this deal is like putting lipstick on a pig and telling you it's Sydney Sweeney, when in reality it's Rosie O'Donnell. They're calling this a historic peace deal. Iran's people are calling it surrender. And it's likely shocking to the Trump base, from MAGA to conservatives to Republicans. Many are in agreement calling it surrender. Yet somewhere in fantasy land, the White House, Donald Trump, and JD Vance want us to believe this is what strength looks like. The question is simple. Did Trump end the war smartly, or did he trade away American leverage and Israel's security just to get a breather in the form of lower oil prices, a political win in November, specifically the midterms? Maybe the truth is that, and we hope that's what it is. The deal itself is telling on itself. Trump says the deal is complete, the blockade is coming off, and the Straits of Hormuz is reopening. There's a 14-point MOU, a memorandum of understanding, with a 60-day window, a ceasefire that includes Lebanon, and Iranian leaders already acting like they forced Washington to back down. Honestly, that's what the optics show. The other issue, while trivial, is the MOU. It's simply a ceasefire with another name. Meanwhile, European leaders are applauding, suddenly welcoming Donald back into the fold, preening and prancing as if they had anything to do with helping, when the reality is they did everything to undermine. Markets are cheering, and everybody seems excited except the people who will actually live with the consequences. The Iranian people, still waiting for the hope Trump promised. Future American citizens, and our own soldiers who will undoubtedly become targets down the road. Hey, we have 47 years of broken treaties proving that. So let's start with the basic question. When Iran's generals and Western elites are both celebrating the same document, what usually happens next? Is this really peace? Or is it just a temporary armistice that gives Iran leverage and gives Trump a talking point and possibly a midterm win? And what does it say when the White House is selling it as a masterstroke, while Democrats call it a surrender document and most of Trump's supporters agree? But before we break down and judge this MOU, let's lay down a simple test. What would a good Iran deal actually look like if it was written to protect American and Israeli security first? These aren't my original thoughts. They're the administration's demands. And with that, let's bring in the Jee-man. If I can find my little control buttons here. Here we go. And how you doing, Jee-man?
Doing well. How are you, William?
Hanging in there. How was your trip to Hawaii? That jungle forest of Hawaii. Did you have to sit there and get down and dirty, or did you stay at the 5-star hotel?
A little bit of both. I might look a little darker. The sun was brutal, but it was great.
A little darker. Well, let's get right on into it. We have a lot to cover. It's been, I've checked out other podcasts and news. This is a hot topic right now. So the first thing I want to talk about is what our original demands were from Iran that Trump and the White House stated. No nuclear development, which means deal ends enrichment as a weapons pathway, dismantling the key infrastructure, and it doesn't hide behind vague language like current status quo. And I bring that up, current status quo, for a reason. No nuclear ballistic missile development. I bring that up specifically. Any serious agreement must forbid ballistic missile development and testing. No terror abroad. Tehran must stop funding and directing Hezbollah, Hamas, and other proxies. And permanent toll-free Strait of Hormuz. And real verification and enforcement, meaning tough inspection, snapback penalties, and the ability to restore sanctions or military pressure. all of this was on a page and a half. It was in plain language, and yet your thoughts on the demands and expectations, and when you saw that, your thoughts were, hey, we could do this, we could get this done. What were your thoughts on those original expectations and demands?
Well, I thought that was a no-brainer. I think you have to be tough, and whatever you decide, you can only get softer from there. So that's the main issue: is where we land with the MOU. The final agreement's going to be softer than the actual MOU.
Right, fair enough. And I guess any comments or disagreements or thoughts on the intro or on the whole Iran war scenario before we go any deeper, just to get you so the audience knows where you stand with this?
Well, it's definitely softer than I would have thought. And I think a lot of this has to do with the midterms coming up, how it's affecting the economy, and Europe's oil supply. That's a huge influence on us because what happens with their economy could affect us as well. So I think it's pretty much right on the money. I I do think politics plays into this, absolutely. And we don't have the
Right.
luxury of a dictatorship like Iran does. Okay, so what I will say for sure is I believe that this is setting Iran up for failure because I don't think they can help themselves. And we'll talk about that as the time goes on. But
Right,
I
right,
think
right.
Iran can't help themselves, and this MOU will be torn up.
I agree, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper. 10 seconds each one. No nuclear development. Did you think that was possible when going into this?
Oh, absolutely. That why did we start bombing them in the first place? It was because we didn't want to have any nuclear development on their end. So that's a non-negotiable for sure.
No nuclear ballistic missile development. Did you think that was possible?
That's hand in hand, but I would say no ballistic missile development, period. Why do they need long-range missiles?
No terror abroad.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what they've been doing to Israel over the past few decades, unacceptable.
Past few decades? You mean since the creation of the state? Well, actually, you're right. Not Iran, but the Middle East in general. You're right.
Yeah,
Since you're
I'm
right. The
talking,
last 50
since
years. The
70,
last 50 years.
79.
79.
Yeah.
Right. So hold on. That's 20, 40, 46 years. So the past 46, 47 years. Permanent toll-free Strait of Hormuz?
The international waters. So that's not
right.
a negotiable thing either. That has to be international free for all ships.
Okay, tough inspections, meaning real verification, because remember the JSOC and every other agreement, the inspections have never happened to the degree that they had agreed for them to happen. So the real verification and enforcement, your thoughts on that with the original demands?
Obama made the same demands. Here's the difference. So now we've decimated their military. It will take them at least 10 years to rebuild to any type of strength.
Gee, that's not the question. The question is allowing of inspectors to come in versus how they've done it in the past. Was that a realistic demand?
Absolutely. But what I'm trying to say is that they're in a different spot than we were with Obama. They had everything intact, but right now everything's in tatters over there. So we still need to have those strong inspections, but we're definitely at a stronger spot, and they're in a weaker spot than they were just a year ago.
To deny the inspections, they're not in a stronger position.
Yeah, they can't deny it. And
okay, yeah. Okay. So that said, you said earlier you expected the final outcome to be a little bit softer, but yeah, all those things are pretty much non-negotiable. So to me, that was the bottom line. This was as far as we could go. To me, there was no negotiation.
Right. So this was the softest agreement that we could ever come to.
Right.
Which is why we started bombing them in the first place.
Exacto mundo. Okay, now that we've drawn the line for what a real Iran deal should look like, let's talk about the guy trying to sell this one as wisdom instead of surrender. JD Vance, the salesman. JD Vance, my little essential oil. I have a cure-all here. It's called the MOU for Iran. You won't believe how great this MOU is. The View, Megyn Kelly, everywhere, the Gutfeld Show, everywhere I went to sell snake oil. Those are my initial thoughts. Before I get into the details here, your quick initial thoughts. And feel free to disagree. I know I can be a little bit pushy, as Annette pointed out yesterday, so feel free to disagree.
A little pushy. As long-time viewers of the podcast might know. What I will say is, look, like I just said, we're in a different position. So the original Khomeini is no longer there. He was there basically for what? Almost 40 years? And he's no longer there. We're dealing with different people. So their rhetoric's going to be...
40 years. 40 years and then less than 24 hours once the war started.
Well, less than 24 seconds, I believe.
Yeah.
He died in the first minute. So what I will say is, and that depends on when you think the war started, because some people will say a year ago when we originally bombed their nuclear facilities. But what I will say, and we'll get into it as we go along, but what I will say is that we need to think of this as they need to talk tough. Their Iranian leadership needs to talk tough because they got people right underneath them going, you're weak, and I'm just going to kill you, take your spot, and I'll talk tough. So they've got to talk tough. And so they might say, oh, yeah, they capitulated, they gave up, they surrendered, but they've got to say that. And maybe behind the scenes, it's a lot more amenable to us. So we don't know that. I'm just speculating. But I do know that they've got to talk tough, and I don't put much stock into their public words.
So I was just thinking as you were talking, my grandmother, she was one of these pitch tent Christians, but she lived in the backwoods in the jungle, literally, people in Panama. And the tents, the revivals, the snake charmers, all that. I mean, she's a hardcore Christian, read the Bible every day, but that was fundamentalist. My mom's a bit of a fundamentalist as well. So are my two sisters. They look like social liberal hippies when you compare them to the theocracy of Iran. And I think part of this problem of what we assume is happening behind the scenes, to me, is simply Iranians who are listening to what Allah tells them. It's your right to lie to the infidels. That's what I think is happening behind the scenes. Now, on JD Vance, I'm not going to attack JD. I like JD. This is a big blow to him, though, because on social media, Trump is taking a lambasting by everybody outside the hardcore brainwash MAGA, meaning Trump walks on water for them. You know, every leader has that. And so I'm not going to attack JD Vance. He's the messenger. This may be his deal, but he's also the messenger. And to me, this is Trump, Vance, and Rubio does not seem happy about it. We'll get into that in a little bit, but he's part of the deal too. So Vance's core pitch, he says his deal is how you stop an endless war that critics secretly want conflict, where the critics secretly want forever conflict. My stance is that's a lie. Critics wanted regime change or a real rollback of types, because without it, Iran will simply regroup, rearm, and continue exactly as has for 47 years. Where am I wrong with that logic?
You're right with that logic, except for we don't really know who's in charge right now. And so they're negotiating with someone. We don't know whether they're really hardliners. Like you just said, they're fundamentalists, but maybe that's an act. Who's in charge of Venezuela? It was the second in command once they got rid of Maduro, but she's playing ball. So we don't know if this new leadership is going to play ball or not. Maybe in the short term, they have to talk tough. They got to consolidate power. And maybe they're telling Trump, hey, let us have this agreement, but we'll get our people in line and we'll be more amenable to you. Who knows? There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes.
They know at this point, they know who's in charge. You can only shake that out for a little bit. Somebody's signing that deal.
Right. Yeah.
And
so
they know
they're talking to someone. Absolutely.
Yes. So they know. So I don't think that flies anymore. Now, history to me, G, shows through Obama's deal, through previous deals, through deals we made with Noriega, Panama, dictators, they always break it. So history shows that bad concession-heavy deals like this MOU, that's actually what creates endless wars by giving the regime time and resources to reset. You yourself said they can't help themselves. So your thoughts on that thought process?
Well, acquiring enriched uranium, that's not easy to do, and that will take a long time. They've lost what they've had. So 10 years ago, when Obama gave them free money, they still had whatever they had enriched to that point. They no longer have that. It's buried under rubble. So I will say that a lot could happen. The cemented leader for 40 years is no longer there. You got another leader who's going to be looking for the knives every time he enters the room. And so he's
literally.
Yeah,
Literally.
literally. Yeah, absolutely.
Why? Why is that? What's his nickname?
I don't know.
The gay Ayatollah. Remember? Because word on the street is he's gay, so I don't think this Ayatollah is going to last.
That's what Jesse Waters has been calling him, but is that real?
Oh, I didn't know. It just fits the gay Ayatollah. I don't watch Jesse Waters, but even a simple mind like Jesse Waters can think like me. Yes. That's the word. Is he's gay.
Right.
He's also impotent, had to go to London. He's a mess, and he's not well liked, and I think that's why they're having turmoil there, and I think he's more of a puppet. But that said, Iran gets benefits per Vance if they behave, if they end enrichment, if they allow strong inspections. That's what he's saying. But as we get to the MOU, that is not the case. And in nearly 5 decades, Iran has never consistently honored agreements. They've never honored agreements. They've only honored their goals. So I guess I'm framing this as Vance is asking us, we Americans, to ignore this whole history of Iran and to believe what he's trying to sell us. Do you believe what he's trying to sell us?
Well, I will say you're making an absolute good case for the previous Ayatollah, but the gay Ayatollah, we don't know if he's going to survive.
No, the gay Ayatollah. Get it right. The gay Ayatollah. The gay Ayatollah.
We don't know if he's going to survive and lead this thing. I think there's going to be a lot of turmoil. But the whole idea of regime change, I don't think was ever Trump's. He would have liked that, but I don't think that was his goal. So what's the off-ramp here? The guy in charge. Get rid of the guy in charge. That was the on-ramp. Now the next guy in charge, he might not be there long. And then the next guy after, he doesn't have any uranium, so he has to start from scratch. So I think they've basically decided they've reset them back to zero. You're right. They'll start building up again depending on the leader, but that could take 30 to 40 years.
So first, I disagree. The only goal you can have with Iran and a theocracy as fundamentalist as they were, and look at it, they're still fundamentalists. They killed 30,000 some odd Iranians who tried to usurp what they want to do. So to me, there is only one option when you mass kill 40,000 people like that, is regime change. So, and we'll keep going, but I have it somewhere in my notes. Trump did say regime change a few times. That's the big myth that's going on. I never said regime change. No, El Donaldo, you are not being truthful to us. I'll dig that up. But Vance claims, Gee, this is not Obama's deal. But the talking points are familiar. Strong inspections, phased benefits, empowering people on the ground, and the promise that this time the regime will change course. And while Obama sent a couple billion, and we're going to get into it in a little bit, the MOU states $300 billion they're going to get. So what to me, Trump outdid Obama. Instead of Obama only sent $2 billion, Trump's getting ready to give him $300 billion. So what's the real deal? What's the difference in Obama's deal and this deal? Outside of the fact I know you're going to go to where they stand today after all the bombing. Just focus on the deal. What's the difference?
It's the same deal, but the military is in rubble. So I will say,
your diehard answer. You're like the Democrat. They're always wrong, and they go racist.
You tried to say don't use that, but that's exactly the difference. Trump actually did something. Obama just said, well, just take the money because we got an election to run. Trump's saying, well, we bombed you. You don't have a Navy. You don't have an Air Force. You don't have anti-aircraft. And so here's the difference. If they actually renege, we just go right back in there and start bombing. But Trump, I know, to go back to your previous point, Trump did say regime change, but that wasn't the primary goal. There's no way to do regime change unless you
without
put boots
troops
on the ground.
On the ground.
Trump would never put boots on the ground. I mean, we all know that. Even the Democrats agree with that. So the Democrats who now hate this deal, I don't even know what their motivation is.
Trump didn't put boots on the ground because of the simple fact America's tired of boots on the ground.
Yeah.
The right course of action would have been to put boots on the ground for a quick, decisive victory without see, here's the problem. We put boots on the ground every previous excursion for the benefit of the military-industrial complex. When we put boots on the ground to take someone out, we always succeed. When we are committed to the war, we win and we're out. But as Eisenhower warned us, the military-industrial complex has taken over. So Trump is a no-win political situation and can't put boots on
So
the ground,
you
which
think
raises
if
the
Bush had
question.
not, you think if Bush had not gone into Iraq and not had set that example, Trump would have done this?
I don't think we would be in this position had Bush not gone into Iraq. Bush completely destabilized the Middle East and emboldened Iran. So to me, that's not a legitimate question. I'm not saying you're not legitimate.
No,
It's not a
let me
legit question.
rephrase the question then.
No, I
If
know
there
what
was
you're
no
saying.
example of boots on the ground in Iraq, you think Trump would have put boots on the ground in Iran? Is that what you're alluding to?
No, it's not just Iraq. It's Afghanistan, Iraq, all these excursions where we're
Okay.
putting boots on the ground without, if none of that had happened and we'd gone and put boots on the ground, yeah, nobody would say a word because there's no boots on the ground.
Yeah.
But,
I just think Trump's being consistent with his whole idea that he would never put boots on the ground anywhere, although he did Venezuela.
no, that's my point. That's my point. The real reason at the end of the day is the people. But Trump gave that promise to the people. So okay, so it's a twofold process. It's the people are tired of boots on the ground, and Trump gave his word. So to me, well, why did you do this? Was his intel that bad? Maybe. So Vance sells the Gulf funded Reconstruction Fund as proof. It's Gulf funded, meaning the region's gonna pretty much pay to rebuild Iran, which they won't rebuild Iran. They'll take the money and fund terrorism. But JD Vance is saying, well, it's not American taxpayer money. I don't care. Money is still money. Once Iran has access to 300 billion and unfrozen assets, the regime decides how much goes to civilian reconstruction versus the IRGC and the proxies. And before I get your take on that, let me push back. Who cares how devastated their military was? How did Iran fight their wars? Through proxies, through other terrorist groups. That's how they fought. So it doesn't matter if they have no army, no navy, no nothing. That was never their strength. Their strength was the terrorist groups. And that's what this money will be used to rebuild. So I don't care that it's not taxpayer money. I care the fact that Iran's going to go back to where they were. We've gained nothing with this MOU. Your thoughts on him selling it, no taxpayer money, but it's still money. They're going to rebuild.
No, it's still money. I mean, it's like the roommate that I once had went to Europe and came back and said, I don't have rent money anymore. Can you forgive it? And I said, I just funded your European vacation. Like, no. It's the rent money I just don't have. Like, okay, money is money. It's fungible. Whether you spend it here or there, absolutely, that's true. So I think the money spigot will stop if the terror continues. And now Hezbollah has Iran under its control, so it can start attacking and blame it on Iran. And Iran might be innocent in that case. So,
well, no, because Hezbollah is funded by Iran
right now, but that doesn't mean all those arms are not still there. Doesn't mean that they still can't.
Funded. They've been funded. So if Iran had the power, Hezbollah, you need to turn those over. And Hezbollah goes, no, you gave it to us. Iran is still responsible at the end
Absolutely.
of the day.
I'm just saying that Hezbollah could start this thing up by themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on to JD Vance. We didn't attack Vance, but we've got to talk about this. Lindsey Graham said this is Vance's plan. Trump joked that the G7, was it G7 he was just at, or wherever he was at in Europe, signing this deal with other G7 nations, that I'm going to take all the credit, but if it fails, it's on JD. Now, he said it jokingly, but this is a big game changer for JD if he runs for president and it goes south. How much of this, and they're saying this is JD's idea, this whole MOU. I think it's a horrific, terrible idea. I'm not going to attack him, but if this is the type of plan he comes up with, I right now don't want him as my POTUS down the road for foreign policy. Your thoughts on the word on the street with this being JD Vance's deal, how he's selling it?
Well, okay, so let's think about what happens in 5 months. It's the midterms. And again, I'm not downplaying the whole idea that this is all about politics, but if you lose power, then the other side comes in and does something very different or does the same thing and packages it differently. But 5 months from now is the midterms. What's in 6 months?
Okay,
6 months.
okay.
6 months from now, everyone's going to start declaring running for president, including JD Vance. And he doesn't want this a thing. And political memory is short. This thing ends, let's say, June, July, August maybe. We're not going to be talking about it in December.
Maybe. Okay, so a couple of quick questions before we move on to the MOU itself. If your entire argument rests on if they behave, how serious are you really about dealing with a regime that has never behaved with any past deal? And at the end of the day, G, who actually creates endless wars? The people who demand regime rollback or the people who keep writing checks to Tehran and calling it peace? So is JD offering a tough-minded strategy with results coming through this MOU, or just the same old cash and promises formula in a new MAGA blended bottle or branded bottle?
Well, I will say that we can't control them. But if they behave, that's a valid clause. You can't say, well, they will definitely behave, and then you run for president, and then they start doing something. It's like, well, you promise that they're going to behave. So absolutely, it's a conditional. You got to have some leverage on them. And we'll go through the points of the MOU to talk about those leverage points. But you can't control them. And again, like I'll just go back to, this is a different regime. Overall, the main regime's the same, but it's a different guy at the top. And maybe he'll be more concerned about flamboyancy.
Maybe. We know his top 10 list includes YMCA.
Well, so does Trump's. So does Trump's.
Yeah, good point. Touche. Okay, I lied. We're not going to go right into the MOU. There is leakage coming out. And with this whole MOU, it's leakage. It's more like leakage from the pens out of Washington, D.C. U.S. intel doubts Iran will abide by the spirit of the MOU long term, as does our intel officer, the Jee-man here, who says Iran can't help himself. So even if it technically stays inside the letter, it will push it and stretch it at best scenario. Worst case scenario, they're going to attack somebody just because that's who they are, bullies. Now, some in the Trump orbit see this as a temporary off-ramp, which I think we're going to talk about here in a bit. But Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, word on the street is they're not cheering this. And did you see that picture? Now, I don't like snapshots like that because they're never true. But it fit the moment. Rubio's like, when they took the picture at the G7 here last night, he's just not looking happy. So Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth are not cheering this. They raise alarms about inspections, Iran's history of cheating, and the scale of upfront concessions. They're raising the same issues I'm raising. Tom Cotton warns that any inspection regime, short of physically taking away Iran's nuclear capability, can't truly work. And obviously, JD Vance is taking the point to be the explainer-in-chief, insisting the deal will transform the Middle East. Your thoughts on the pushback? Were you surprised to see Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio not on board with this? Again, word on the street. We haven't heard from them specifically. And even if they disagree, they're both smart enough, because any employee, we can have our differences inside this room. Once we leave this room, you're representing the company and our decisions and supporting those. So they will play that role. But word on the street is they're not happy. Your thoughts?
I can see that them not being happy, but I view this as a split between MAGA Republicans and establishment Republicans and neocons. And the latter two want basically a total decimation of Iran's government. I don't think they would even argue against boots on the ground. But the JD Vance, the Trump wing, the MAGA, I've seen them unhappy with this war since it started. And they want it to be, I mean, I think they would like America to be more isolationist, which we can't ever be. I'm not considered MAGA. Well, I don't consider myself MAGA myself, but I don't see Rubio falling into the MAGA wing. He is more establishment, so I can see him not being happy with this, especially if he runs for president and he's thinking we're going to have to deal with this later. But in my point of view, we're not going to have to deal with this for 10, 15 years, not 2, 3 years.
I disagree.
I think that's how they view it, 2, 3 years.
They get 300 billion. You can rebuild a lot real quick. No, I will push back on this. This isn't a MAGA. I'm not gonna lie. MAGA. This is where they're insufferable, uneducated Democrats in their mentality. At the end of the day, Iran is a terrorist nation that has destabilized the Middle East, that has tried to have Trump assassinated, that wishes the fall of Western civilization. So this isn't a MAGA versus establishment. I don't want boots on the ground, but you have to look at this overall from the right perspective. You go in, you go out. I served, my family served, every person in my family served. I come from a military town. I still have high school friends who are lifers in the military. Nobody wants to see them go to war, but you don't cut off the head of the serpent. You have to destroy the serpent entirely. So to me, it's easy to frame it as an establishment neocon. I'm not even thinking of the neocons. I'm just thinking of people our age who have seen this. This newer generation has no clue because they're not in the Middle East until something hits home. They don't care. Until another 9/11 happens, they won't care. And that's why they want to be isolationists, not realizing that when you become isolationist, the bad guys are going to gobble up the world and you're in a circle fence without anybody to help you and you get conquered.
So, okay, and fair enough, but let me ask you this. So what's your definition of taking out the head of the snake?
The regime, the leaders of the IR, the IR. Why am I trying to blank here?
IRGC.
The IRGC, and the theocratic leadership. The problem is we can do that with the help of Mossad, but Trump is. Today he did his best interpretation of an anti-Semite as I've seen. Oh, Hezbollah was doing a better job than Israel in taking out the terrorists. He's lying. Syria was able to take those terrorists out. You know why, G? Why he was able to take out Hezbollah? Because Israel came and bombed other key areas, key landmarks, key points, and that allowed the Syrians to go in and take them out and finish the job. So I hate it when Trump lies, and he's been caught in lie after lie. Oh, Qatar and Iran, they share a border. They don't share a border, you moron. For the first time in my life, I'm like, dude, shut up. Shut up. You're showing yourself to be as stupid as Democrats say you are right now. I'm not happy with this. So that's how you take them out. If you're not going to put boots on the ground, you use Mossad, you start targeting them, and you cut Israel loose. There is no better intelligence agency in the world than the Mossad. The CIA is junior varsity. In fact, they're middle school compared to the Mossad. You cut them loose. And maybe the Mossad oversold this, but maybe this time frame, let them regroup and you take the regime out. Don't worry about taking the Ayatollah out. The IRGC will take him out and theocrats will take him out when they get a chance.
Yeah, and my only retort to that would be maybe that's the plan in the future if they, quote unquote, don't behave. Is you can take them out, but you don't need a hot war. You don't need to do that in the middle of a hot war, and you don't need to have the bombing continue or the oil to stop flowing.
They can fart and chew gum at the same time, G. In World War II and World War I, we had many operations going at the same time. So, okay. So enough spin. Let's go to the heart of this and walk through the 14-point themselves, creating what the MOU actually says with what it really means on the ground. So to the audience, we're a half hour in. We're not going to get bogged down. The MOU is a simplistic page and a half, 14-point, and a lot of it's going to be repetitive, but we want to go through every point so you understand, and we're going to give you our thoughts on it, and we're going to quickly move on. So I've broken it up into two sections in terms of how I see the financial and then the armament section. So point one, immediate and permanent ceasefire on all fronts, including Lebanon. The MOU says U.S., Iran, and their allies agree to immediately and permanently end military operations on all fronts, explicitly including Lebanon. My take, and then I ask you for yours, Jee, Israel will not abide by a permanent ceasefire. If Hezbollah keeps firing, the second Israel defends itself, Iran will claim the MOU is broken and blame Jerusalem. So, Jee, do you see this as setting Israel up as a designated scapegoat for when Iran and its proxies want an excuse to walk away? Because let's be honest, after 9/11, the Middle East was never the same. When we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, Germany and Japan were never the same. So you see my point? When we get attacked, we go, damn the torpedoes, kill them all. So who are we to tell Israel, no, they just attacked you, but you can't attack back? Is this not setting this Israel up to be the fall guy?
So you're saying that Lebanon or the Hezbollah does not have to abide by this peace treaty? Because I would say that if they attack first, Israel needs to fight back. So I
How's that
think they
going?
would be
No, no.
released from the MOU term.
We would think they're going to negotiate that, but with the anti-Semitism rising, it's never before seen the heights it has, because Democrats support the anti-Semitism by supporting all these Muslim leaders who demand the genocide of Israel, from Mamdani to the person in Michigan who sat there and said, "Oh, I don't want to criticize this because I have a lot of Iranians who love the Ayatollah or the Ayatollah's father." And no, he said that. He didn't say I'm parsing it, but he said I don't want to speak on this Iranian war and what we did because I have a lot of people in my district who love the Ayatollah. That's what he said.
Yeah.
So anti-Semitism, my point is it doesn't matter if Israel is in the right. The Megyn Kellys, the Candace Owens, the Tucker Carlsons, to me, they're anti-Semites. Megyn Kelly's too stupid to realize what she is, but she's supporting the anti-Semitism of Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. So it doesn't matter if Israel's in the right. They're going to get blamed anyway.
Yeah, and they might, but I don't see. I agree with you on that point. I just don't see. Let's say 2 years from now, Lebanon
No.
Hezbollah.
We're talking about within the 60 days. Let's.
Oh, you're talking about
the
the
next
MOU.
Months,
Right, okay.
MOU.
Got it.
The MOU, and let's say it gets extended 3 times through the midterms. Anytime during that process is what I'm talking about.
So what I would say is that if Hezbollah attacks and Israel retaliates, I don't see Iran going, okay, all over, we're going to start lobbing missiles again, if they even have any left. So I think this is I think that's a moot point in my opinion. I think the whole point here is to try to get Hezbollah from stopping the attacks there, because we know they're going to be the first ones to attack. So that's my opinion, but we'll see what happens.
And you could be right, and we'll move on, but I will say this. Iran has been the one that has been pushing for keeping Hezbollah intact, to leave them alone for some reason. They're like a father figure to them. And that is massive red flags alone, just that thought process. If we go by your track of mind, then they shouldn't care about Hezbollah. Do what you want, Israel. Take them out. They're not our concern. Because that's what you're saying at the end of the day.
At this point, I think Iran's just trying to regroup and be able to breathe.
Then why insist on Lebanon?
We'll see.
All right, point 2, mutual respect for sovereignty and non-interference. So the MOU says both sides pledge to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and not interfere in internal affairs. I guess we got to leave the Ayatollah alone. My read is for Trump and Vance, this is talking point cover. We turned the page, is what they're saying on Tehran and Iran. It looks like Washington finally admitting it can't reshape Iran's regime. Even though Trump said Iran, they would love regime change, they're kind of washing their hands of it all. So on the world stage, to me, it lets Iran claim moral high ground and portray the U.S. as the aggressor who had to back down. Your thoughts on point number 2?
Well, the only one not... I shouldn't say this. Let me put it this way. So they were not respecting Israel's sovereignty, and then finally we decided not to respect their sovereignty. So I think this is not about America. This is more about Israel and Iran. We'll see if this ends up being being a real thing.
This is about the U.S. The U.S. and we had all these demands. We bombed the hell out of them. Help is coming to the Iranian people. We've taken them out. We're doing this, and all of a sudden, we're washing our hands.
Absolutely. Iran's going to say, well, now the U.S. is going to respect us. And so it does look like a defeat. So in terms of political viewpoints and the propaganda part of this is not good for us. It's good for Iran.
That's right. It's winning the propaganda war, which is almost as important as the actual war in many instances. Point 3, 60-day window to reach a final deal, which is extendable. The MOU says the U.S. and Iran agree to negotiate and finalize a comprehensive agreement within 60 days, which may be extended by mutual consent. My read, that may be extended line, is everything. It allows this to roll on for months while Trump keeps claiming for the markets, because that's starting to piss me off, that we're close to a final nuke fix. The only thing I think Trump has ever been quick with is when he was making love to Melania. to be quite honest. Yeah. So my question to you, G, do we expect this to be extended at least 3 more times to get past the midterms? Here's where the midterms come in, turning the MOU into a semi-permanent holding pattern dressed up as a breakthrough. Is that kind of what you may be seeing here?
This is all dependent on the Iranians. I mean, if they decide we're not going to pursue nuclear weapons, it won't be extended. But they're not going to decide that. And I think, again, like I've said from the beginning, this is a lot to do with politics. We can't lose power. The adults can't lose power and let the kids back in.
But yeah,
81-year-old kid Hillary Clinton wins election in 2 years. We just can't do. I think she'll be 81, and I know she's running. That's a whole nother podcast we can do. But yeah, I expect this to be extended because Iran won't agree to these things, and they'll just say, "Okay, well, let's continue negotiating."
And I also think that Trump will want. I think Trump wanted this MOU. He'll take the hit now, and like you said, 24-hour cycle. You know, we're going to be talking about something else here in a month from now, and the oil barrels were down to what, $70 a barrel now. I mean, what was that, a $50? I don't know where it was at the other night, but it was as high as $100. So not a 50, so a $30 drop from its high, 30, 35.
Yeah, it's at
drop.
70 now, but before the war started, it was at 60. So we're not that far off.
Right, exactly. So I think Trump is doing this for the midterms. That's my take on that. All right, point number 4. The U.S. naval blockade to be lifted within 30 days. The MOU says the U.S. will start removing its naval blockade immediately and fully end it within 30 days, restoring maritime traffic to pre-war levels. My read is that blockade is the main source of our leverage. Why? Because Iran is in negotiations because we started to blockade their tankers. Originally, we were letting their tankers and everybody go through. Once we started blockading their tankers, the money stopped flowing and they were losing $400 million a day. So we've given away a key pressure point before we even start really negotiating. In 30 days, they're not going to do a lot of negotiating. I can guarantee that based off historical political negotiations that can take months at the quickest and years at the norm. So the question for you, G, is reimposing the blockade later will be politically and diplomatically much harder as well as realistically in getting our ships over there. So, and that's going to happen after this peace narrative takes hold. And the quick defense that's going to be needed if Iran breaks the MOU is what I call surrender leverage, meaning Iran can shoot for a while. Our ships show up, and then Iran goes, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. And Trump wanting peace before the midterm, okay? I mean, he already did it once. Well, them attacking them over there, that's a little different than if it was here. Remember that line he used a couple weeks ago? Your thoughts on point number 4.
Well, anyone who's had kids, and I'm going to use this example because it's going to work very well. A kid misbehaves and you take away their iPhone or well, most kids won't have iPhones, but iPads. You take away their iPad and you say, you're not getting this back for a whole day. And who suffers the most? It's the other parent.
Yes, exactly.
I'm like, I just took the iPad away, and then my wife's on my case going, now I've got to entertain this kid who's asking for this, that, and this. And because you took away their iPad, which actually they didn't bother me as much. So the fear of loss for anyone is greater than the pleasure of gain. So this is a great example here. This happens in the stock market all the time. So yes, we're lifting the naval blockade, but we're not removing our naval presence. They're going to stay there. So what's going to happen
I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, so what's going to happen is if they get out of line, they just say, oh, okay, I guess you didn't enjoy all that oil revenue that much anymore. So we're going to have to start taking that away again. And then they're going to say, oh, wait a minute. So I think that analogy applies, at least I hope it does, with the Gayatollah, that he'll say,
there
okay,
you go.
he gets the money flowing again. He gets his economy starting to build right back up. And then Trump says, you're not playing by the rules. We're going to have to shut it all back down. And I think that will be even more punishment for him when he has gain and then he's about to lose it again. I think that would be worse than just because right now they're in a corner. What happens to an animal that's backed up into a corner and they got nothing to lose? Well, now if they gain something back and then now they have something to lose, they're going to be more pliant. So we'll see what happens. But
Well,
that's my take on that.
Trump did say if they break the MOU, we'll have to go back to bombing them. I'm like, bomb car guy that wipe it off the face of the earth. And they're going to come to that negotiating table real quick with China saying, get to the damn negotiating table. Point 5, Iran's best efforts for 60 days of toll-free safe passage in Hormuz. The MOU says Iran will use its best efforts to ensure safe passage for commercial vessels. Let me repeat that. They will use their, quote, best efforts, unquote, to ensure safe passage. Best efforts, but they did not, or will ensure that there is safe passage. Instead, they said best efforts. They're going to do that without charge for 60 days. After that, it will work with Oman on administration and services in the Strait of Hormuz in line with international law. My take, best efforts is a loophole big enough to sail a tanker through. They can bomb. Well, that's our best efforts. They didn't have this flag. We thought they were a threat. They said this, they said whatever. It gives Iran the wiggle room to bomb if harassment or accidents occur while still claiming compliance. So my question to you, G, does this post 60-day administration and services language set the stage for fees and tolls after the 60 days, giving Tehran legalized leverage over global shipping?
I think we would clamp down on that pretty hard. And like I said, our presence is still going to be there. But what this leads me to think is that the regime, the Ayatollah, is not completely in charge.
Right,
he's in charge in name, but he doesn't really have that layer of bureaucracy to make sure everyone's in line. And so he's probably afraid of that. He's probably saying some rogue element in the IRGC is going to do something, and I don't want to cause another round of bombing because they did their thing and I can't control them. So I think that's what's going on over there. That's my suspicion. Otherwise, I don't see why Trump and or Vance would say, okay, do your best, unless this is really a concern.
Again, I think this is for the midterms. I think this MOU, they're like, we'll take the nasty hits for the next month and a half, because when midterms roll around, all those haters are going to jump on board because they hate for the transgenders, for the anti-Semites, for the racists, for all that will overwhelm anything that deals with Iran. And I think that's what they're banking on. Let's review real quick then these last what is 6 points, just said 5 points. So when the ceasefire covers Lebanon, but Hezbollah remains armed and dug in, who's going to be accused of breaking the deal? Give me your 10-second answer here. Israel, the U.S., or Iran?
I think it's going to be 10 seconds of nothing here. I think it will be Hezbollah.
So you think Hezbollah will be taken to be at fault? Just like just like Hamas was. That's my take.
I mean, does Iran have any propaganda power anymore? Can they say it's really just Israel? The rest of the world would have to collectively decide, oh yeah, we saw all those missiles coming from Hezbollah, but we're going to blame you instead.
But they do anyway. And it works with the anti-Semites here, with the Tucker Carlsons, with the Megan Groper Kellys, with the Candace I Married a Gay Man Farmer Owens. So yeah, and that's just me thinking he's gay and the way he acts and what I've read. So I don't know.
No, but some like those pundits might say, hey, yeah, Israel wants to restart the war for their objectives. So yeah, I can see them saying that.
Yeah, I think Israel will be blamed. And I think the U.S. and Trump, based off what Trump's already saying, will blame Israel. We cannot survive or have any business. The Middle East will be hands off to anything U.S. if we lose Israel as an ally. We have no intel there. We're sitting ducks without Israel. Israel cannot survive with the U.S., but we most definitely cannot survive with anything in that part of the region of the world without Israel. And Trump is too arrogant to realize that. So why are we lifting the blockade up front? Why not sit there and go, we're going to keep our blockade there. We're just going to let the boats come through. Trust us, Iran. Why not just do that, G? 10 seconds.
I don't think that buys us anything. I having our presence there and giving them back their privileges to the iPad and then threatening to take that away, I think that will be more effective, in my opinion. Just being a father, that's way more effective than just you don't have your iPad anymore and you can't have it for the next month, then my kids become worse.
Iran is equivalent of a father who's a pedophile and domestic abuser. Come on, that's not a good analogy. Okay, so
I know it's a simplistic analysis, but I think that's the what's happening.
So is my counter. It's a parent who beats her kids. So does this first chunk of the MOU look like two equal sides compromising, G? Or like the stronger side giving up leverage in exchange for promises from the one that's been breaking promises for 47 years? Now, if this is where Annette goes, well, that's kind of a rhetorical question. In a way, it is, but that's the actual question.
We're giving up leverage, but I think we can take it back immediately. I think that's the difference.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think in a moment we could say, okay, back on, and we're going to be tougher next time. That's my thought on it.
We've already given up the blockade and put the Straits of Hormuz on Iran's honor system. I got to get in here. Honor system. Now let's follow the money. Let's follow the money. Show me the money. And the nuclear language, the part Vance insists will keep Tehran from ever getting a bomb. So, point 6, minimum 300 billion Reconstruction and Economic Development Plan. The MOU says the U.S. and regional partners will design a plan with at least 300 billion in financing for Iran's reconstruction and economic development, with mechanisms to be finalized in the final agreement. So we'll design a plan with at least 300 billion with mechanisms to be finalized. So it doesn't say they're going to be getting 300 billion tomorrow or right away. So we really don't know. My read, though, regardless, that's blackmail money. Iran wages without regime change, that's blackmail money. Because unlike Germany, who we conquered and they surrendered and we negotiated terms to rebuild and they followed through, Iran's not in that type of position. So that, to me, that's blackmail money. Iran wages war, survives, then gets a bailout to rebuild while its regime chooses how much goes to the people versus IRGC and proxy. So my question, you hit your neighbors hard enough, you hold out long enough, and the West will eventually pay you, or do you have a completely different take? The floor is yours. Give us your 3 cents worth of the 3 billion.
Is it Williams anti-MOU thought number 1 or Williams anti-MOU thought number 2? Which one's? I'm just messing with you. No, So if I look at Japan, one of our greatest allies since the 1940s, that happened because we helped them rebuild. And I think the calculus here is, let's help Iran rebuild. Let's not forget, China is going around helping many countries have infrastructure, and now they're beholden to China. So there is maybe a calculus here that says, okay, if we help Iran become more modernized and wealthier, maybe even the Ayatollah will give up his dream of destroying everything because they're enjoying so much wealth. I think that's a worthy gamble. With these $300 billion, we need to make sure that it is being used for that. I don't know what the safeguards are for that, but they can't use that for weapons. I'm sure Trump and Vance know that.
So 2 points of pushback. Japan and Germany were decimated. Iran is not decimated in terms of how they fight wars through their proxies. They're not. In fact, that's one reason I believe they want to keep Hezbollah. They still have leadership in place. They still have an infrastructure there in place. That's their starting point to rebuild. I think that's why they're hot and heavy to keep it there. Germany and Japan were completely decimated. China is helping people at ridiculous costs, with ridiculous loans, with terms they're not going to be able to pay these poor third world nations. And then what China does, you default, okay, we don't want your money, we're just taking the port we built up as ours. And these nations, so literally there are nations there with Chinese contingents that China now owns all that. In the U.S., they don't have to do something like that. They just go out and buy farmland. They just go out and do this, do that. So that's another poor example. On the surface, it sounds, hey, that makes sense. But when you look down into it, look at the context of it, the intricacies of it, no, that doesn't really work. So I kind of disagree on that. Give 10 seconds here to push back on my point before we go on.
Well, Iran is China's biggest source of oil. So if we can win Iran over, and I'm not saying the Ayatollah is the end-all ally of the United States, but it might be the the person who comes after him. Or that person might be harder, but at least you have a chance. And sometimes you just got to roll the dice. I agree with you. I mean, most likely not, but it's worth trying. Is my
You
opinion.
can never have a chance with that type of regime in place. All right, point number 7: termination of all types of sanctions. The UN, the IAEA, and U.S. sanctions. So all sanctions. The MOU says the U.S. commits to lifting all forms of sanctions, including UN Security Council resolutions, which they're all for because the UN's as corrupt as they come. I mean, when you have countries like Iran sitting on your Human Rights Council, that says everything by the UN. So they're going to be quick to want to open that up. The IAEA board resolutions and all unilateral U.S. sanctions on a timetable in the final deal. So in defense of Vance and Trump, this isn't right away. They still have to negotiate it. My read, though, is once that architecture is dismantled, rebuilding the same wall of pressure becomes nearly impossible. And I see this as a long-term strategic gift to the regime. So does this trade away the very thing that brought Iran to the table in the first place? That's not a great question, because I don't think this really ever brought Iran to the table, because they dealt with China and Russia to supplement. And the regime and the IRGC, they weren't suffering. It was the people who they don't care about. So I'm not sure what to make of this point, or really what's a great question. But your thoughts on the termination of all these sanctions?
Well, the idea was the sanctions are there in the first place because they're going after nuclear weapons. So if they decide we're not going to do that, it should be lifted. We don't want to punish them for particularly their regime. Maybe we do. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion about
the people. The people, you mean?
Yeah, the people need to have economics. They need to have an economy that's functioning. But you can push back and say that we've done the same thing against Cuba for, 60 years or 50 years?
Exactly. That was going to be my point.
Yeah.
Exactly, Cuba. Not to mention, every war we fought, you always bomb the cities, not because you want to, because eventually that's how you kill the serpent. And at the end of the day, if the Iranian people aren't going to rise up and we're not going to be providing them arms to help them rise up, then what's the point?
So again, the sanctions are there for them to stop making nuclear weapons. So if we're now going to say, okay, if you're going to stop making nuclear weapons, which is one of the points of the MOU, then why do we need the sanctions there? And I'm sure that these sanctions will come right back if this doesn't happen in the next 60 days.
Yeah, that's not going to be as easy, as that takes time. And here's the point you were talking about, and I had it highlighted because it's one of the most important points of the MOU. Iran reiterates no nukes. They reiterate as if they stopped enrichment the first time they said they would. So Iran reiterates no nukes, enriched stockpile handled later with IAEA. So handled later. Iran reiterates it will not develop or procure nuclear weapons. The fate of enriched material and the scope of enrichment will be handled in the final agreement. So Iran's not agreeing to anything. Will be handled in the final agreement with down blending on site under IAEA supervision instead of shipping it out. So it's going to be done on site. It's not going to be shipped out like they were saying earlier. My read, that's a step back from earlier drafts that said Iran would never produce nuclear weapons, as we talked about in the first part of the show. The language got softer as talks went on. So Iran keeps enrichment and its stockpile, on its territory under an inspection regime that Cotton and others argue is untrustworthy by design. So what's the difference from the Obama agreement or any other? Or whatever take you want to give
for them to keep it, that's the worst thing about this MOU, because what stops you from upgrading it again? And I don't know what their calculus is on this. I mean, they're just going to use it for nuclear power, but I believe the enrichment percentage is like 6% for a nuclear power plant, but 90% for a weapon. So they don't even need to have anything that's nearly that enriched. So to me, I think this will kill the MOU in the end. Or the final agreement.
So you think this is the Achilles heel?
Absolutely. I mean, how do you come to an agreement if you say you can keep it? I mean, you can keep the wasted material or whatnot. I think most of it has been buried under rubble, but I'm sure they still have like a stockpile here or there. It's still there. And so this is the Achilles heel. I think it will come down to this one.
All right, and for the audience, I keep saying the IAEA. That's the International Atomic Energy Agency, and it's the world's central intergovernmental forum for scientific and technical cooperation in the nuclear field. These were the people who were turned away or said, "Okay, we got to push back the inspection for 2 more weeks," so Iran would say that so they could go hide all the nuclear enrichment they were doing. And as we learned, they had enough new enrichment. Uranium to sit there and do what 4 to 5 nuclear bombs, 7 to 8 they were talking about. So to me they are a toothless organization. Point number 9: maintain the current nuclear status quo. No new U.S. sanctions or deployments. The MOU says until the final agreement, Iran maintains its current nuclear program status. The U.S. imposes no new sanctions and deploys no additional forces in the region. My take: that codifies Iran's current gains. By codifying, meaning people, it makes it permanent. They get to sit on their existing nuclear position while we commit not to ratchet up pressure. In essence, we've gained nothing and we've codified, we've strengthened Iran's stance. Gee, Israel is expected to tolerate that status quo, even though Jerusalem has repeatedly said it will not live with that level of enrichment forever. How do you expect them to abide, and what right do we have to get them to abide, which in essence, by some means surrender and expect an eventual nuclear death?
This goes in hand with point number 8. It's
right.
I mean, again, this is the Achilles heel for them to maintain their status quo. There must be some calculus that the amount of material they have right now is not worth even building one bomb. Then it's like, okay, well, let's just let them keep whatever that is. Even that's like, well, okay, maybe eventually they might be able to build one, and all you need is one in order to have power. And ship that wherever you want or launch it wherever you want. So this is a huge Achilles heel, and the final agreement is different. So, but like I said in the beginning, final agreement will be weaker than this. That's my opinion. Could be stronger.
Right. And we're going to talk about in a future podcast, in the very near future, the Python strategy that Reagan used against the Soviet Union to slowly bring them to their knees, that some believe Trump is using here. I don't know. I'm still researching that. But, I'm looking at this MOU as it's going to fail. Trump knows it's going to fail. Vance knows it's going to fail. They just want to get through the midterms. And I think these 2 points are the Achilles heel. Point 10, Treasury waivers for Iranian oil and associated services. The MOU says the U.S. will issue waivers for exports of Iranian crude oil, petrochemical products, and associated banking, insurance, and transportation services until sanctions are fully lifted. So it sounds like this happens right away. My read is Washington becomes the enabler of Tehran's economic comeback. This is no different than Carmelo Anthony's parents enabling him to go kill an innocent kid. So Washington becomes the enabler of Tehran's economic comeback. We green light the very revenue streams Iran needs to refund its regional machine. This is separate from the $300 billion. The $300 billion is something that's going to put them over the top. But this immediately allows them to start refunding Hezbollah, rebuilding their terrorist regime, rebuilding their military, and doing squat for the people. So yes, oil prices are falling and global markets are cheering. But I see it as cheap gas today for a stronger adversary tomorrow. Short-term gain, but a long-term loss is how I see it. Gee, how do you see this?
Yeah, that's one way to see it. Again, the whole idea of having them have something to lose again would be important, because right now they have nothing to lose. They have an economy in shambles. They have high inflation. And so they need to feed their people, or have their people feed themselves. So there is that aspect of it. And I'm not a...
Do they really? Seriously, do they really? They killed 30 to 40,000 without thinking twice.
Yeah, no.
Do they really care about feeding their people?
But they had food back then. So now they're going to be running out pretty soon. I mean, I'm sure they still have enough food to continue, but it's getting more and more expensive. That's the inflation. The cost of all that's jumping up. So their people need to eat. Okay, so you can hold off 40,000 people who are just there protesting, but when you got however many millions of people hungry, there are not enough guns to stop them. They're going to overthrow you. So I think they're looking at that as well. I mean, we can't control how they spend that money that they get from taxing the economy, but their economy has to work, I think. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I hate to break it to you, G, but they have over 40 million bullets. And no civil war or revolution has ever happened without the revolutionary side having arms of some kind. And the people have no arms. I think this is one of those unique situations. They don't care about the people. They don't care what the world thinks of them and how they treat the people. And if they have to kill 1 million people to scare off the other people, they will do that in a heartbeat. Point number 11. Frozen and restricted Iranian funds made fully available. The MOU says the U.S. will ensure frozen or restricted Iranian funds and assets are made fully available with release procedures to be agreed during negotiations. So combined with the oil waivers, this could be a massive cash unlock. Tehran immediately has more resources to reward loyalists and rebuild networks. Gee, there is no credible firewall in the text to keep that money away from terror groups. So are we simply not enriching Iran to continue funding and rebuilding to grow their terrorist networks once they get access to all these funds?
Yeah, they can spend that money any way they want. So absolutely, I think that would be the case. Provided, we'll see how, again, this is an MOU, basically for 60 days, let's just agree on this. This is the one-time money that they'll just pull out immediately and back into their own country so that it cannot be frozen again. So at that point, the only leverage we would have is stopping their economy and the $300 billion that we could stop that in the future as well. So do I not like this? I don't like this point either. But again, it was their money in the first place. So I am more of a let's be fair, but they need to stop funding terror. They need to stop their nuclear weapons program. Will they do the stopping the funding of terror? I put that at like a 10% over the long run. And the long run, choose whatever time frame. The nuclear weapons, I put that at 50-50 right now because I'm hoping they decide this is not worth pursuing a nuclear weapon.
Right. I think the long run comes after the midterm. Real quick, why did the nuclear language get weaker from never produce nuclear weapons to maintain status quo? Just a temporary MOU agreement or something else?
I think in order to not have bombings, just let's continue agreeing to negotiate, but we're not going to bomb as long as you don't ramp up what you're doing right now. I think that's my take on that.
Cash sanctions and nukes already look lopsided. Now let's finish the document up. Got a few more points and look at the so-called oversight and then talk about changes they quietly made to soften this deal even further. So we're going to wrap this up. We got a few more points. Point 12, Joint Executive Implementation Mechanism. The MOU says the U.S. and Iran will establish an executive or implementation mechanism to supervise compliance with the MOU and the final agreement. This means probably setting up inspections, things of that nature. My read, the same two sides that failed for decades now promises to police each other. There's no automatic enforcement, just a joint committee that can argue while Iran consolidates gains. So how do they expect America to buy this nonsense based on Iran's history of never allowing inspections? And I'm only talking about the last 3 generations because I'm talking about 3 generations ago and the last 2 from that. I'm talking from people born who are in their 80s to their 40s. Anybody younger has no clue and they're going to not understand what we're talking about. They won't see the logic. But how do they expect anybody 40 and older to buy into this nonsense?
Well, they're not going to let our inspectors there. So I don't even see this happening, in my opinion, over the next 60 days. So,
okay, fair enough.
And what are they going to say? Like, oh yeah, this is the facility over here. Oh, no, don't open that door. Don't open that door. That's where we keep this and that, but that's where the nuclear stuff's going to be. So this is just, what do you call it? You just go through the motions. It's just saying, okay, we'll show you this facility and that facility, but it's not going to be really where the real stuff is contained.
You're going to hurt him to one area. So he goes, where's Bob? Oh, he went looking for the bathroom. Woo, 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 woo. Bob enters a radioactive facility with all the enrichment. Point 13, final deal negotiations begin after key provisions are implemented. The MOU says after signing the MOU and implementing ceasefire, blockade lifting, shipping normalization, oil waivers, and asset releases, both sides will negotiate the final comprehensive agreement. This is important. After implementing the ceasefire, blockade lifting, shipping normalization, oil waivers, and asset release. So after all the money goes out, after the Strait is free from American intervention, after America's no longer a threat to fire, then they'll negotiate the final comprehensive agreement. So we're giving up all that stuff we talked about. A lot of it's going to have to be done to get to the final agreement. My read, if it happens, if the MOU is followed, Iran gets ceasefire relief, economic oxygen, and a reopen Hormuz first. We only talk about the real final deal after we've given away everything. This is why I think this is just a ploy by Vance and Trump to get through the midterms. I can't see this ever happening without us losing the midterms, without us losing 2028 from president all the way down, because I think Iran will have made the Republican Party look so weak the Democrats will be able to take advantage. I read this as this is the killer point that will never work. Your thoughts?
I think that it is to give us time till December, but I think we can spend 2027 really hammering a lot of this out. I agree with you. I think this will be extended. This is not going to be just 60 days. It's going to be longer, but we'll see. I mean, they get ceasefire relief. They get to enjoy some of the wealth back. Their economy starts to go back to normal. But in the end, we still have the leverage over them because we can resume the bombing. We can resume the blockades. We can resume the sanctions at any time. And I think they will see, well, let's say the Republicans hold on to the House and Senate. The Iranians will be in an even weaker position at that point. That's my opinion.
Okay. I'm not going to give any pushback because I think it's a moot point. Not your opinion, but we're never going to get to that point. Is my belief. Point 14. The final deal endorsed by the binding UN Security Council resolution, the most corrupt organization since the League of Nations. That's my personal take. The MOU says any final agreement will be endorsed via binding UN Security Council resolution. My read, if a weak final deal ever does get signed, this turns into global law, making it much harder for future U.S. leaders to walk away, even if Iran cheats. This is so ludicrous. I don't even see this happening. But gee, does anyone expect this an actual final deal to be signed based off just the last 2 points, the two nuclear points? I think there's 8 and 9, and point 13 and 14. Does anyone actually expect the final deal? Do we actually expect to make it to a final deal?
I think there will be.
Oh, you know what, Gee? This is like, I'm going to bring peace to the Mideast that all presidents say that never even gets talked about once they get elected. That's what this reminds me of.
It could be. If you look at how Trump was, like you mentioned earlier, greeted by the G7 and all the world leaders or the European leaders, acting like he's their best friend now. It's amazing. I don't understand the motivation there. I think they will. The UN will push something through. I don't agree that they will laugh this off. I think so the UN is weak, has always been weak.
Whoa, hold on, G. The UN they're going to receive the documents and be part of the negotiation, but they're not going to go, hey, here's the document we're signing off. The document has to be agreed on by the US before the UN even is able to have a final say. So right. I don't think it'll get to that point. You're saying the UN is going to push it, but are you saying they're actually going to try to sign something?
I think the UN is going to sign on to whatever the US agrees to. In the end, I think they're just going to say, yeah, sounds good. As long as look, it's not just the U.S. that wants cheap oil. It's every nation around the world, including China, including Russia. Russia has their own exports, but they all want cheap oil. They don't want war. So I think they're just easily going to sign on to whatever. I think the only one who's going to be against it is Israel. We'll see what happens.
All right, G. One of the final questions here for you. These edits don't scream "we got tougher." They scream that over time, the text moved closer to Iran's preferred language. Isn't that a total victory? These 14 points for Iran?
I think that's how they're going to spin it. Again, this is just an MOU. This is hey, here's what we agree on.
What are you talking about? This MOU. Doesn't this MOU scream total victory for Iran? Don't look at it long term. Just look at it I'm asking to look at it from the MOU. When you look at this MOU, doesn't this scream total victory for Iran? Or am I looking at the MOU wrong? We know we have our theories and our beliefs and our thoughts about what will actually happen. But on the surface, for the propaganda here, isn't this scream like total victory for Iran?
Yeah, I get the question From their point of view, yes. And I think that's actually what they're saying right now is, hey, we want this, this, and that. We're getting our money back. We're getting the economy back. But in the end, the nuclear part, this again, that part is a MOU. This is the 60 days. Okay, you can keep the enriched uranium for now, but we're going to come to a final deal, which I think they've got to hold to. You got to give it up. You can't have the final deal saying you can keep the enriched uranium at that point. So I think right now they're going to spin this as a win. We'll see if that ends up giving them false confidence because we could start the bombing at any time. When's the midterms? November 6th? November 7th,
Right.
the bombing starts? Who knows?
Okay, so if Iran, Democrats, and European leaders all see this as some form of America backing down, why is Vance and Trump? That's a silly question. We know why they're trying to spin this as a win. What are your thoughts on the Democrats? Because most people agree with the Democrats. A lot of not the hardcore MAGA, but people like me with the Democrats saying this is a surrender. I'm like, yeah, the MOU's a surrender, and the Europeans are loving this. What are your thoughts on the fact that some of us would ever align with the Democrats like this or Europe?
No, I think the Democrats don't know where they stand on anything. If Trump's for it, they're going to be against it. So I've just seen this over and over again. So what are they actually fighting? Some of my Democrat friends are like the stupid war, the stupid war. Now they're saying, "Oh, we're giving in. We're giving in." And it's like, well, what do you? And that's why I asked you earlier. Like, what does that mean? Killing the head of the snake? Because the Democrats are arguing kind of the same thing. Like, what do you want? Like, what do you think should be done? Oh, we shouldn't have gone there in the first place. Okay, we're already in there, meaning we've already been bombing them. So we can't go back in time. You got whatever paths are ahead of you. And so they're going to just choose the one that Trump's not on. And that's
Yes,
or
true.
actually they're just going to avoid the one Trump's on and they're going to argue for another one, but they're not even making a sane argument. So their approval rating is lower than Trump's and the Republicans. So
Right. We're going to talk about that too, because that everybody's like Trump's doomed. Trump's doomed. Have you seen their numbers? Okay, Gee, what message does this send to other hostile regimes when they're looking at this scenario?
I mean, I think that the message it sends to them is when you're bombed, this is how you react. But I think in the end, like if you hold out long enough, then maybe you can get some sort of victory. So I'm not calling this a victory for Iran yet, because we still don't know whether they will get to keep their enriched uranium or whether they will continue pursuing nuclear weapons. But I don't think it's a good message for, let's say, North Korea. They already have nuclear weapons, but they're whatever they want to pursue in the future. So I think it's not a good message.
Right. I agree. I think this is Russia's doing the same thing. They're holding out. They're just going to sit there and let Ukraine waste away through manpower. So I think the whole scenario is if you hold off with the U.S., eventually their people are going to politically take down whatever administration is pursuing this. But the reality of it is I think this is a one-off for here. So final segment here, G, before I let you go. Let's talk about where the risk really lives now, because the people celebrating in Brussels aren't the ones who will pay the price if this blows up, including the people here celebrating as well, because our soldiers could pay the price. But I have to, when I hit stop, I'm going to have to make sure. Okay, test, resume.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. All right. Okay, so let's get to our final topic here, G, before we close the night out. Immediate winners. Iran gets legitimacy, relief from a blockade, promises of sanctions, termination, and a path to 300 billion. Global markets and Western politicians get lower oil prices and the ability to say they ended Trump's war. Americans will see not necessarily immediate relief, but I think within a month's time we'll see relief. Do you concur that those are the winners? Or are there any other winners that may be missing? So Iran, the American people, global markets.
I I think China wins because their oil prices drop. So that's a big winner. But I think I believe Trump and Vance will come out ahead on this. And you might not see it right now, but
Well, no, you're right. I agree.
because he promised never to put boots on the ground, and he has not put boots on the ground.
I just think Trump miscalculated this, and that's why we have this MOU now, because they thought they could take out Iran quicker without putting boots on the ground, and anybody should have been able to tell them that was an impossibility. I thought maybe they were waiting to do something. It appears they got nothing. Long-term risk holders, not necessarily losers, but the ones who can end up paying the price. Israel, facing a Hezbollah that may rearm under a ceasefire umbrella, and an Iran that keeps a nuclear status quo while the world celebrates peace. All this is in their backyard with a backyard neighbor that says, I want to kill you. I want to kill your kids. I want to kill your dog. I want to kill your cat. You will die. Then there's shipping companies and U.S. allies in the Gulf who will live with an emboldened Tehran taking a more formal role in Hormuz. Quote, administration fees, unquote. In essence, a toll. And U.S. deterrence, which now looks like it ends in negotiated payouts. Any other losers, or do you disagree with my take on the losers?
I don't disagree with that. I think Israel, from their point of view, they're always going to be at risk of annihilation. Unfortunately, that's just their geography and their enemies around them. So, this is not going to help them in the long term if Iran does not give up funding the terror with Hezbollah.
Right. Okay, so so here's a theory I have. Politically, this deal looks perfect for the midterms. Calm headlines, cheaper gas, and a big peace signing ceremony. If Iran cheats after November, the administration can pivot with the B2s without facing any voters immediately. They have 2 years. The danger is that when Iran or Hezbollah test the limits, the balance of power, military and economic, will have shifted further in Tehran's favor because they've been rebuilding. And they may test the limits right before the election, too, and dare the administration to do anything, knowing it could jeopardize Trump's preferred outcome. So it's a twofold strategy here. Trump wants us to get past the midterms. Iran may go, we're going to do you in once and for all, Trump, and do something right before the midterms. Your thoughts on my theory, or what is yours?
No, we've disagreed on some points here, but I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think it is all about managing power on our side, and yeah, nobody really wanted this war. We were forced into it because I think Iran's nuclear weapon was imminent, and I think they were close to getting it, and we had to do something, and no other president would.
Right. Okay. All right, G-man, any final words before you sign yourself out of the studio, brother?
No, I'm hopeful for this MOU. I share a lot of the same sentiments. It is about politics. I think November is not about what happens in October. November is about what happens pretty much starting midsummer, so July. And like you said, oil prices will take a few weeks to come back down. I've already seen our gas come down to 5 something already. So I think our economy is slowing a little bit, and we've got to, in the end, we've always talked about this on our podcast. It's the economy stupid, to quote James Carville, and I never quote James Carville.
Who is stupid? Has gotten stupid. Gee, I agree with you. I think Trump has relations with all these oil companies. I don't think they've done it yet, but I think Vance and Rubio Trump will be making trips or calling these CEOs in and go, you guys want to do business in Venezuela? We've created peace there. You want us to lift this? Oh, Alaska's opened up. We're opening up federal lands. You want that? You play ball. And I think we will see these oil prices come down within a month. And the reason I say a month is analysts are saying, oh, it'll take 6 months, 8 months for this to come down. I think it won't be immediate, but it's close to immediate with a month time frame. And at the end of the day, we've also been shipping secretly oil. So we do have stashes. So I think that will happen. All right, Mr. G-Man. Thank you for joining us. And we covered everything. Took us about 90 minutes, but I thought one of our most thorough and hard-hitting shows. All righty, brother?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
You got to leave the studio, G. Should be at the bottom.
Oh.
So where does this leave us? 3 things to watch. First, watch Israel. Do they actually reduce operations in Lebanon, or do they keep striking Hezbollah positions regardless of the MOU language? That's the first real test of whether this ceasefire is real or just a paper promise. For the record, if we're attacked, by God, damn the torpedoes and blow them all to hell. That's the American belief. So why would we ask Israel or demand of Israel to let themselves get attacked and not respond? Second, watch Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz. After the 60-day toll-free period, do we see subtle harassment, a demand for fees, and new conditions on shipping? Do tanker companies quietly report risk creeping back in? Because if that happens, the permanent opening of Hormuz isn't so permanent. Instead, it's Iran playing Monopoly. Do not pass go, pay the toll. Third, watch the 60-day window. If that deadline is extended once or twice with technical issues cited, that confirms what I already told you. This is a holding pattern. I said once or twice, I'm thinking 3 times. It's not a decisive settlement, this MOU. Honestly, my hope is that it extends for 3 cycles to get the midterms past us with GOP gains. Then let's send them to hell if they choose not to play ball. My stance is clear. This is not a victory. It's an uneven ceasefire that hands Tehran leverage and buys Washington breathing room at Israel's expense and at the cost of, or at the potential cost of long-term deterrence. So ask yourself, how much trust are you willing to put in a regime that's broken every peace deal and ceasefire, including the most recent ones Trump's team has supposedly negotiated? How can we call this a win? And if this MOU collapses, will the lesson in Washington be never try pressure again or never trade your leverage away too early? Or are we simply cowards when someone stands up to us? And that makes me think shades of Jimmy Carter and Barack Hussein Obama. That's the question we're all going to have to answer. And we'll know the truth when the next rocket flies. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and share this episode of Fired Up Conservative Talk, and follow us on YouTube under Grumblings Media Politics, Rumble under Grumblings Media. Until next time, stay safe and never give in, and stay fired up. Hey everybody, this is William Del Pilar, founder of Grumblings Media, and I want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our